Hello, welcome to another scary story that you can fall asleep to. The river was too quiet. Even the wind refused to stir the surface. When Ethan and Mara paddled into that stretch of water, their oars barely made a sound, as if the current itself swallowed noise. They were 3 days into their trip. No cell signal, no roads, just forest and fog. The morning sun was weak, bleeding through the mist like an old lantern. "It's beautiful," Mara whispered, though she shivered as she said it. Ethan nodded, but his eyes lingered on something ahead, a wooden dock jutting out of the mist. There shouldn't have been a dock here. They slowed the canoe and drifted closer. The dock was old, its boards soft with moss and time, but someone had used it recently. Fresh footprints led from the water into the trees, small footprints barefoot. Ethan frowned. "Maybe a cabin nearby," he said. Mara didn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the tree line, where shadows moved just slightly too slow to be wind. A faint sound reached them, children laughing, far away but clear. The laughter echoed across the water, bright and hollow. Mara gripped Ethan's arm. "Tell me you heard that." The laughter faded, replaced by a dripping sound, rhythmic and heavy. Ethan tied the canoe to the dock. "Let's just check it out. Maybe there's a village." Mara hesitated, but followed. The air on land was thicker, colder. A path wound through the trees, lined with carvings. Small wooden dolls nailed to trunks, their faces blank. Some had river stones for eyes. "Local art," Ethan muttered, trying to sound casual. But the deeper they walked, the quieter everything became. By the time the village appeared, even their footsteps were silent. The place looked abandoned for decades. Crooked houses of gray wood, a rusted bell tower, boats overturned and half buried in weeds. Yet the air smelled like smoke and wet bread, as if people had just left. "This wasn't on any map," Mara said. Ethan pointed toward a cottage with its door open. Inside, dust floated in sunbeams, disturbed by something that had moved not long ago. On a table sat a bowl filled with river water, and he blinked. Tiny fish bones arranged into letters. They spelled "stay afloat." They spent hours exploring, though neither said why. Something about the silence demanded it. The houses were mostly empty, but each one contained bowls of river water, fresh, always with bones inside. Some spelled words: "Listen, wait, don't drink." By dusk, fog had rolled in thick and low. "We should head back," Mara said. Ethan agreed, but when they reached the dock, the canoe was gone. Only its rope remained, cut clean. The river rippled once, as if laughing again. Then stillness. They called out, but the fog devoured their voices. "Somebody took it," Mara whispered. "Who else is out here?" Ethan scanned the water. Shapes drifted beneath the surface, just barely visible. Pale, thin, slow-moving. "Fish," he said, though his tone didn't convince either of them. The dock groaned under their weight. Behind them, a bell rang once, soft and low, from somewhere in the village. It wasn't a gust that made it toll. The air was completely still. They hurried back toward the houses, the mist closing in around them. Mara's flashlight flickered, throwing long shadows that stretched unnaturally far. "We'll wait until morning," Ethan said. "We can find another way out." The first cottage they entered had a fireplace and dry wood stacked by the door. It shouldn't have been possible in such damp air, yet the wood caught flame easily. The warmth felt wrong, heavy, almost humming. As the fire burned, water began to drip from the ceiling, not rain. From above, Mara pointed up. A dark stain spread across the boards, dripping steadily into the fire. The flames hissed, but didn't go out. The smell changed, iron and salt, like blood. Then faintly laughter again, this time right outside the window. Ethan froze. Shadows danced on the fog just beyond the glass, Small shapes, childlike. Kids, Mara whispered, almost hoping. One of the shadows pressed its hand against the window, fingers too long, skin pale as the river. When Ethan moved toward it, it withdrew, leaving wet handprints behind. They didn't sleep. The laughter came and went in bursts, sometimes close, sometimes deep in the woods. Around midnight, the bell rang again. 3 slow chimes. Each one made the floorboards vibrate under them. Mara whispered, "We need to leave when it's light." Ethan nodded, but couldn't stop staring at the window. Outside, the fog glowed faintly blue now, rippling like water. He could almost see faces in it, blank, smooth faces drifting past, watching. When dawn came, it was gray and cold. The fire had burned down to ash, but the wet spots above were gone. Outside, the fog lingered heavier than before. "Maybe there's another dock," Ethan said. They followed the path past more cottages, all with the same bowls of river water. One had toppled over, spilling onto the floor. The boards beneath were warped, blackened, like they'd rotted instantly. "It's the water," murmured. "It kills the wood." A giggle echoed from behind them, followed by a splash. They turned. The fog rippled as if something had just darted into it. The splash came again, closer. Ethan approached cautiously. "Hey, hello." The water near the shore bubbled. Then a head emerged. A child, maybe 10 years old, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide and colorless. She smiled. "Are you lost?" she asked. Her voice sounded like water poured into glass, smooth, echoing. Ethan stepped back. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The girl tilted her head. "They're waiting below." Then she sank straight down. No ripple, no sound. Mara grabbed Ethan's arm. "We're leaving now." They followed the riverbank, hoping to find another dock or a boat. The air grew thicker the farther they walked, like wading through invisible syrup. Strange shapes lined the water, small wooden crosses, each one tied with a strip of cloth. Names were carved into them, though most were worn away. The last one was fresh, Ethan. The sound of the bell returned, distant but rising. By midday, they reached the end of the village. There, a stone pier jutted out, half collapsed. A boat rested against it, old but intact. "We can use that," Mara said. They pushed it into the water. For a moment, the current caught it gently. Then the fog shifted. Faces appeared beneath the surface, hundreds of them, pale and open-eyed, staring upward. The current reversed. The boat slammed back into the pier, hard enough to crack its hull. Mara screamed. The faces didn't move. They ran again, deeper inland this time. The forest twisted paths looping back toward the village, no matter which way they went. Every so often, they'd pass the same crooked house, the same dolls nailed to trees. Each time, the dolls' heads were turned differently, as if following them. Ethan stopped to catch his breath. "It's like we're inside a circle," he said. Mara looked at the river beyond the trees. The water was climbing the banks, slowly but steadily. "It's rising," she whispered. By nightfall, the water had reached the edge of the first house. The bell rang again, this time not from the tower, but from beneath the surface of the river. The laughter returned too, dozens of voices now circling them. Ethan built another fire, though the wood hissed and bled sap that smelled wrong. Mara stared at the flames. "I think they were villagers," she said softly. "The children, they never left." Outside, something small walked past the door, dragging its hand along the wall. Ethan looked out the window. In the fog, he saw figures, a line of children, waist deep in the rising water. They held hands, faces turned toward the houses. Their mouths moved in unison, though no sound came through the glass. "Don't look," Mara whispered, but she couldn't turn away. One of the children, the same girl from the river, raised her hand and pointed straight at them. The bell tolled again, and the fire went out instantly. Darkness swallowed the room. The only light came from the faint glow of the spiral patterns that had formed on the walls, symbols made of wet fingerprints. Ethan felt something brush past his leg, cold, small. There inside, he breathed. A giggle erupted behind them. Mara swung her flashlight around. For a second, it illuminated a row of faces peering through the cracks in the floorboards, smiling, eyes wide and glistening like fish. The light flickered and died. When it came back, the faces were gone, but the floor was damp, covered in tiny footprints. They ran outside into the fog, the bell still tolling, the water now waist deep. The children stood in the shallows, watching. One of them held something, a small carved canoe made of bone. He placed it in the water and whispered something Ethan couldn't hear. The toy began to move upstream against the current. The other children followed it, humming softly, a sound like prayer. Mara grabbed Ethan's hand. "They're leaving," she said. "We should follow them." He hesitated, but the water was rising faster now, swallowing the houses. Lightning flashed far above, illuminating the forest like a cathedral. For a moment, he saw something massive under the river's surface, an outline stretching the entire width, like a body sleeping face down. Then it shifted. The current exploded outward, waves crashing against the shore. The children didn't react. They just kept walking, vanishing one by one beneath the surface. The last of the children turned before disappearing. That same pale girl. "Don't fall behind," she said, her voice echoing inside Ethan's skull. Then she was gone. The river was roaring now, swallowing the village whole. Ethan and Mara clung to a roof as the water climbed higher, bringing with it strange lights that pulsed below. "It's not flooding," Mara gasped. "It's waking up." From below the waves came the toll of the bell again, louder than thunder, shaking the world. They clung to the roof as the water churned with impossible strength. Shapes passed beneath, too big for fish, too human for animals. The moon broke through the fog for a brief moment, and in its pale light, Ethan saw faces under the surface, hundreds of them, mouths open in silent song. "It's them," Mara said, voice trembling. "They're not gone. They're part of it." The water surged again, tearing away the chimney. Ethan held on to Mara's wrist as the current dragged them into the black. The world became bubbles, pressure, and cold. Ethan's lungs screamed as the river pulled him deeper, down past where light should reach. He tried to kick upward, but hands, small, soft hands, wrapped around his ankles, guiding him, not pulling, guiding through the murk. He saw a glow ahead. It wasn't the surface, it was deeper. Shapes drifted in that glow, children holding hands, their eyes blank and shimmering. At their center, something vast stirred. The glow pulsed, and the current stopped. Ethan hovered in still water, weightless, his mind ringing. The children formed a circle around a huge shape, half buried in the riverbed. It was stone, or maybe bone carved into the likeness of a face, its mouth open wide. The current flowed into that mouth, endless and calm. The children began to sink, one by one, into it. Ethan felt the pull too, but a voice echoed in his head. "Not yet." He turned. Mara was there, eyes wide with light streaming from her pupils. She was glowing, soft like moonlight underwater. The children brushed past her, touching her hands and arms before vanishing into the face below. "They want me," she said quietly, bubbles drifting from her lips. "They've been calling." Ethan shook his head, trying to pull her back, but she didn't resist. "Don't fight it," she whispered. "They're not angry. They're lonely." Her body began to sink. Ethan tried to follow, but the current reversed, hurling him upward. He broke the surface, gasping. The village was gone, only rooftops and treetops poked through the flooded expanse. Fog still clung to the water, glowing faintly red. Mara, he shouted. No answer. A sound rose instead, singing the same voices now distant but layered, harmonic. The river pulsed with it, like a heartbeat. Ethan paddled to a piece of driftwood and clung to it, the sound growing louder until it was all he could hear. Hours passed. The song faded. Dawn turned the fog silver. He drifted, numb, until something bumped the wood. Another piece of debris. No, a small boat, perfectly crafted from pale wood. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in cloth. Ethan hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside was Mara's necklace, still warm, wrapped around a river stone carved with the same spiral he'd seen in the houses. The stone vibrated faintly in his palm as if breathing. He paddled toward what looked like high ground, a hill barely breaking the surface. It was the bell tower, half submerged, leaning, but still standing. He climbed up the slick wood, every step echoing through the hollow structure. From up there he could see everything, the endless water, the drifting rooftops, the swirling mist. At the edge of sight, the river curved sharply into nothing, like the world ended there. Below him, something moved inside the tower. It was a figure, wet, hunched, humming softly. A child, the same girl from before. She was sitting by the bell, legs dangling into the water below. You came back, she said without turning. Most don't. Ethan didn't move. Where's Mara? The girl tilted her head. She's with us now, but you'll see her soon. She touched the bell's side, and it began to vibrate on its own, the sound trembling through the air like thunder. It's waking again, she whispered. The bell rang once, twice. The sky darkened instantly. The water below began to swirl, forming a massive whirlpool around the tower. What did you do? Ethan shouted. The girl smiled. It's not me, it's her. She's calling us home. The air grew heavy. The spiral on the stone in his hand burned. When he looked at it again, the pattern had changed. Now it showed the outline of the same carved face beneath the river. Only now, the eyes were open, the whirlpool widened, swallowing trees and roofs. Ethan clung to the bell frame, trying not to fall. The girl stood, arms spread wide, humming. The sound grew unbearable, like water screaming. Then, with a final toll, the bell cracked. The entire tower lurched and collapsed into the vortex. Ethan was thrown into spinning chaos, dragged under again. For a moment he saw light white and endless, and a figure standing in it. Mara, but her skin was covered in scales that shimmered like the river's surface. Mara, he tried to speak, but the water filled his mouth. She reached out, touching his forehead. You shouldn't have followed, her voice echoed inside him. You'll drown like the rest. But her expression softened. Unless you listen. She pressed the stone against his chest. It sank into his skin without a wound. His lungs filled not with water, but with air. The current stopped around him. What are you? He asked. But she was already fading. He floated in stillness. The children surrounded him again, hundreds now. Their eyes glowed faintly, their voices blending into a low hum. The mother stirs, they said together. She remembers her children. The water ahead began to part, revealing the riverbed again. The colossal stone face was changing, cracks forming, light leaking from within. Something inside it was moving. The children bowed. She wakes. The stone split open. From the fissure came a rush of black water, colder than death. It twisted into the shape of a woman, vast, featureless, crowned with riverweed. Her voice was the sound of storms and drowning. I dreamt of stillness, she said, and you woke me. Ethan's mind filled with visions, villages drowned, forests sinking, oceans boiling. The children rose around her like mist. "You shouldn't exist," he said, trembling. She smiled without a mouth. "Neither should rivers that never end." The creature extended a hand toward him. "Join them," she whispered. Ethan felt the pull instantly, his blood moving the wrong direction, his heartbeat sinking with the current. He saw Mara among the children now, her eyes glowing blue, her lips moving silently. "Don't fight," she mouthed. The goddess leaned closer, her shadow enveloping him. "You brought the offering. You carried the mark." The spiral burned on his chest, Ethan screamed. Light burst from him, the same white as Mara's before. The goddess recoiled, the water around them exploding into steam. The children wailed. In his mind he saw the river reversing, time unspooling. The bell tower reassembled itself. The houses rose again. The fog cleared. For a brief, blinding instant, he saw the village alive, people walking, laughing, the river calm. Then it all shattered. He awoke on the riverbank at sunrise. The canoe floated nearby, undamaged. His clothes were dry. Birds sang overhead. The village was gone. Only the faint smell of smoke lingered. Mara was beside him asleep, but breathing. He shook her gently. She opened her eyes and smiled. "We made it," she said. But when she turned toward the river, Ethan saw her reflection move a half-second late. They paddled downstream in silence. The river was normal again, fish jumping, insects buzzing, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every ripple felt deliberate. "What do you remember?" he asked. Mara hesitated. "Dreams, voices, children." She touched her necklace. It was back around her neck, the spiral stone glinting faintly. "They said, it's not over." That night they camped by the water's edge. The fire crackled, comforting at first. Then, faintly beneath the crackle, came a sound, children laughing, not far away. Mara stared into the flames. "Do you hear it?" Ethan whispered. She nodded. "They're following the current." The river shimmered, reflecting faces that weren't there. "If we keep moving," he said, "we can stay ahead." She didn't answer. By morning, fog had returned. The river bent sharply, and there it was, a dock, old, half-broken, with small footprints leading into the woods. Mara's paddle froze mid-stroke. "That's impossible," Ethan said. "We came from that direction." The laughter echoed again, closer now, circling them. The water rippled against the boat, gentle at first, then rhythmic like breathing. The river went still. Mara's reflection looked up at her and smiled. "You brought her back," it whispered, though her real mouth didn't move. Ethan's paddle slipped from his hands. The fog thickened, swallowing everything. The laughter stopped. Then, softly, the bell tolled once from somewhere beneath the surface. The water shimmered red for just a moment before going still again. The next day, the river seemed calm, too calm. Ethan and Mara paddled slowly, watching for any sign of movement. Yet the fog never fully lifted. It clung to the surface, curling around their canoe like fingers. "I don't think it wants to hurt us, yet," Mara whispered. Ethan didn't respond. Every shadow on the water seemed too deliberate. When a bird took off from the shore, its wings left ripples that formed a spiral before fading. That night, they camped again along the bank. Sleep was impossible. Every rustle in the trees, every drip of water sounded like tiny footsteps. The spiral stone in Mara's hand pulsed faintly. She showed it to Ethan. "They're near," she said, voice trembling. From the river came a faint giggle, layered over itself until it sounded like hundreds of children. Ethan felt it vibrate in his chest. "They're waiting," Mara continued. The fog thickened around their fire, shadows flickering in impossible shapes. In the early hours, Ethan awoke to see tiny figures climbing onto the shore. Small, wet, pale as river clay. The children, they circled the camp silently, tilting their heads. Mara slept beside him, untouched, her chest rising gently. Ethan tried to call out, but no sound came. One of the children reached toward the fire. Its fingers left frost where they passed. Then it vanished into the mist. Ethan could feel the river's presence pressing from all sides. The morning brought no relief. The canoe had drifted downstream, miles from where they camped. When they climbed in, the current carried them faster than paddling should allow. The river twisted unnaturally, looping back over itself. "We're trapped," Ethan said. Mara stared ahead, pale and silent. The water ahead rippled, reflecting not the sky but faces, hundreds, all staring up at them from beneath the surface. Some smiled, some screamed, none blinked. By dusk, the first village appeared in the fog, not the one they had seen, but eerily similar. Wooden cottages, crooked docks, moss-covered trees. No signs of life, yet the air smelled like wet earth and bread. A small hand appeared on the nearest dock, fingers dragging along the planks. Ethan froze. "They're guiding us," Mara said. The hand pointed upstream toward a bend in the river, shrouded in thick mist. "We follow," she whispered. They paddled cautiously, every stroke echoing too loud in the stillness. A shape broke the water, a massive figure, humanoid but distorted, made of wood and riverweed, its head a hollowed sphere. The children floated around it like buoyant lanterns, their eyes glowing faintly. One of them looked at Ethan, tilted its head, and smiled. He couldn't look away. The figure reached out, and suddenly the river rose, water lapping against their canoe, threatening to tip them. The children formed a circle around them. Their humming grew into voices, chanting words. Ethan didn't understand. The figure in the river pulsed in time with their chant. Mara's spiral stone flared, a white-hot light cutting through the fog. Ethan held it tightly, feeling its warmth seep into him. The chanting stopped. Silence. Then, a whisper from beneath the water, "The vessel returns." The river surged, waves tossed their canoe like a toy. Ethan struggled to keep hold, but Mara leaned forward, touching the water. The current slowed, bending around her hand. She spoke softly, repeating words that Ethan could barely hear. The water stilled entirely, reflecting not the sky but the spiral etched on Mara's stone. Below the surface, faint forms moved, hundreds of pale children, hovering just beneath the water's surface. Night fell again, unnatural and deep. The fog thickened, a wall pressing around them. Shapes moved inside it, shadows shifting. One child floated past the canoe, giggling, leaving a trail of frost. Ethan reached out, trying to touch it. His hand passed through, hitting nothing, but the water rippled outward, forming tiny spirals. Mara's voice trembled. "They're testing us." Behind them, the river began to hiss, a sound like hundreds of children breathing in unison. By morning, the fog lifted enough to reveal the riverbanks. But the land was twisted, unfamiliar. Trees bent toward the water, unnaturally. Some bore the same carved dolls they had seen before. One had fresh footprints leading from the shore to the water. Ethan traced them. They were small, adult-sized, elongated. The river seemed alive, moving against its own current. Mara whispered, "We're not paddling downstream anymore. It's carrying us somewhere, or someone wants us there." Afternoon heat brought a false calm. The river was smooth, but Ethan could feel the pull beneath. Small ripples rose in patterns, almost like writing. Mara leaned over the side and traced one with her finger. It spelled, "You're next." Ethan's stomach twisted. He spun the canoe, looking upstream. Fog rolled in quickly, thicker, turning everything gray. Shadows moved in the haze. The children were everywhere now, on docks in the trees, floating just beneath the surface. That night, The water level rose unnaturally, pressing against their canoe. The bell tolled from somewhere far upstream. Its sound vibrated through their bones. The children appeared in the fog around them, humming. Ethan tried to shout, but his voice was swallowed. Mara touched the spiral stone again. Light flared and the children recoiled. Then a massive ripple hit, throwing the canoe sideways. Ethan clung to the edge, water rushing over him, carrying whispers in hundreds of voices. Stay with us, forever. They drifted into a cove that wasn't on any map. Trees formed an arch, thick fog lingering beneath. The water reflected the sky oddly, red and black swirls, like the river was bleeding. A wooden dock appeared, jagged and old. On it, children sat cross-legged, humming a slow rhythm. One looked up, pale with eyes like stones. You can't leave, it said softly. Not now, not ever. Ethan tried to paddle past, but the current reversed, blocking them. The chanting grew. Water began to rise along the dock, carrying the children higher. The spiral stone on Mara's neck burned against her skin. She held it to the water, and the river recoiled slightly. It's testing us, she whispered. Ethan held the edge of the canoe. How do we stop it? The children tilted their heads. Their voices blended into one. You can't. The river began to boil faintly, sending bubbles to the surface like eyes opening. Dawn brought no relief. The mist had spread miles, the sun a dim orange behind it. The river twisted impossibly, looping back on itself. The children's voices echoed endlessly, forming words Ethan could barely understand. You belong. Join her. He looked at Mara. She seemed pale, unafraid. It's calling me, she said quietly. I can feel her. The river mother. Ethan grabbed her arm. We leave now. But she shook her head. The water surged, dragging the canoe toward the spiral of fog ahead. Inside the fog, the river became a tunnel. Light distorted. Shapes moved on the banks, then vanished. The children floated above the surface now, upside down, as if gravity had no meaning here. One reached down, touching the canoe. Ethan felt the river itself enter his body, cold, ancient, endless. He gasped. Mara did too, standing upright in the canoe, facing forward as if guided by an unseen hand. We're crossing, she said softly. The tunnel widened. Ethan could see a village forming beneath the water, not submerged but suspended in the river's surface. Houses floated, forests grew inverted, and the bell tower rose impossibly high. Children ran through streets that twisted like spirals. Mara's spiral stone glowed brighter than the sun. One of the river children swam past, smiling. She sees you now, it whispered. Ethan's vision blurred. The river itself seemed alive, breathing in rhythm with the children's humming. Ethan felt weightless, drifting through the suspended village. The children pointed ahead. A shadow loomed in the center, the massive stone face of the river mother, the fissure from before glowing faintly red. Around it, children hovered, chanting in a rhythm that made Ethan's chest ache. Mara stepped forward on the water itself, hand raised. You will not take us, she said. The mother shifted slightly. A low vibration thrummed through the air, pushing him back. The river mother moved. Water surged around her like tendrils, reaching toward Ethan. He saw shapes moving inside the stream. People from the village, their faces pale, contorted, and still. He tried to grab Mara, but the water kept them apart. The children formed a circle around her. The mother's gaze met his, not with eyes, but with the weight of the river itself. Every instinct screamed to flee, but he was rooted, unable to move against her presence. Mara turned toward him, glowing, holding the spiral stone above her head. Light exploded outward, illuminating the twisted village. The river mother recoiled slightly, water hissing around her. Ethan felt the pull weaken. Then the children began to rise with the current, swirling around him and Mara in a protective circle. "Hold on," Mara whispered. The fog cracked open. Beyond it, he saw the normal river again, sunlight glimmering. For the first time in days, the world felt solid beneath him. Ethan blinked, and the river looked normal again. Sunlight shimmered on the water. Birds called from the trees. Mara paddled beside him, calm. But something felt wrong. The fog lingered, thin and curling, hugging the river's bends unnaturally. Every ripple reflected not the sky, but faint faces. Children pressed against the surface, their eyes bright and blank. Ethan rubbed his eyes. "It's still there," he muttered. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small town along the river. Roads, houses, cars. The world had returned to normal. Ethan felt relief until he noticed the riverbank. Dolls were nailed to trees, fresh footprints in the mud leading into the water. He froze. Mara didn't speak, her eyes on the reflections in the river. In every window they passed, a faint silhouette of a child stared, tilting its head unnaturally. Ethan swallowed. The laughter returned, soft, just at the edge of hearing. They checked into a motel, hoping the night would bring respite. Yet when Ethan closed his eyes, he saw the village under the water again. Children ran along streets of floating houses. The river mother rose from her stone bed, stretching impossibly high. "You brought the vessel," she whispered in his mind. Mara stirred beside him. "They're here," she said. "The children, they came with us." Ethan reached for the spiral stone. It glowed faintly, a tether to the river, a warning he didn't want to understand. At midnight, a knock came at their door. Not the knock of a hand, but a slow, deliberate tap, like wood brushing wood. Ethan approached cautiously. Outside, on the ground, sat a small canoe. Wet, carved with spirals, and moving slightly as if alive. A faint giggle came from it. Mara grabbed his arm. "They're inviting us back," she said quietly. Ethan wanted to refuse, but curiosity burned. The river had followed them. The children were already in town, waiting. The river swelled overnight. Ethan awoke to water, creeping across the motel floor, warm and smooth. Faces pressed against the surface, hundreds of them, pale, small, watching. Mara was gone. A small hand reached from the water, holding her necklace. Ethan grabbed it. Instantly, the current pulled him downward. He gasped, but this wasn't the village. The world around him shifted into gray light, water everywhere. The river had brought its own dimension, overlaying reality with the village's nightmare. The children surrounded him, swimming in midair, hovering just above the flood. Their eyes glowed faintly. One approached, holding Mara's hand. "She's fine," it said, voice like ripples over stone. "But you can't leave," Ethan fought to comprehend. The river mother's voice rolled through the town like thunder. "The vessel awakens," she said. The houses tilted, water filling streets, cars floating past like toys. Ethan realized, once the river follows, the world bends to it. The motel walls dissolved into mist. Windows showed the village under the river, but the ceiling remained the real sky. Ethan felt the pull on his chest again. The spiral stone burned hotter. The children circled him, moving faster and faster, a whirlpool in the air. "Why me?" he shouted. The children didn't answer. Mara's hand appeared in his vision, glowing. "Because you can see," she whispered. "You are the bridge." The river mother rose above the town. Her form blurred reality. Streets, trees, the river itself, all bending toward her. The children began chanting again, their voices rising in layers, echoing through buildings. Ethan held Mara's hand as the pull became unbearable. He was lifted off the ground, spinning toward the surface of the water overlaying reality. "It's all one now," the river mother said. You belong to us, to the river. Suddenly, the spiral stone flared white. The children recoiled, screeching faintly. Ethan clung to it, the light cutting a path through the fog and water. Mara reappeared beside him, glowing brighter. Hold it, she shouted. The river pulsed, violent, trying to drag them down. But the stone's glow pushed back. Ethan realized it wasn't just a tether. It was a weapon, a signal, a key. The river mother shrieked. Water sprang like glass shards, but the children were now confused, scattering. The next moments felt endless. Ethan and Mara were caught between the river's nightmare dimension and the real world. Every building flickered, every tree rippled unnaturally. The children cried, reaching for him, then recoiled from the stone's light. The river mother hovered above, writhing like liquid, howling, her form stretching impossibly high. You cannot leave, she screamed. But the glow of the stone formed a path, a bridge back to the real river, calm and familiar. Ethan grabbed Mara's hand and followed the path. Water surged. Children screamed and vanished into fog, the river mother lunging to stop them. The spiral stone pulsed, guiding them across the warped landscape. Finally, they hit the calm river again. The one they remembered, sun shining, birds calling. The town was intact, the flood was gone. But faintly, in every reflection, they saw small pale faces, watching. They paddled downstream, silent. Mara's necklace glowed softly, the spiral faintly visible. Ethan looked at the riverbank. Dolls were nailed to trees, freshly carved. Footprints led into the water, but no children were visible. They're still here, Mara said quietly. Waiting, testing. Ethan gripped the paddle tighter. He understood now. The river didn't just follow. It lingered, patient, ancient. Night fell. They camped along the real riverbank, fire crackling. Every sound seemed amplified. Rustling leaves, distant birds. Then, faintly, laughter. Not loud, not threatening, just close enough to feel behind them. Ethan's heart raced. The spiral stone burned faintly in Mara's hand. She touched it to the river's surface, and the water shimmered unnaturally, like glass disturbed by wind. They weren't alone. Not yet. By midnight, the river's presence grew. Shapes moved beneath the surface. Tiny heads, pale, eyes glowing faintly. Ethan tried to look away, but the stone forced him to see. The children rose, faint outlines above the water, circling the campsite. Not threatening yet, just observing, Mara whispered. They're deciding if we stay or leave. Ethan's stomach churned. He realized their survival wasn't guaranteed anymore. The next morning brought false calm. Fog hovered just above the river, curling around reeds. Footprints appeared in the mud overnight, dozens, small and elongated. Ethan and Mara paddled slowly, scanning the banks. The river pulsed subtly, like a heartbeat. Ethan felt the pull in his chest again, not strong, not immediate, just enough to remind him that the river mother remembered, that the children watched, that leaving was never truly possible. Hours later, they reached a bridge. Cars passed over, oblivious. The river ran normally beneath, but Ethan noticed something strange. Reflections didn't match reality. A boy in a small canoe paddled backward across the water. He had no face, only pale skin and blank eyes. Ethan grabbed Mara. We can't stop here, the boy waved. The river behind him shimmered. Something enormous stirred beneath the bridge. The river's surface broke, water surging upward, carrying debris, trees, and small houses from memories of the village. The children floated above it, forming a protective circle around Ethan and Mara. The river mother's voice boomed in their minds. You cannot escape me. Ethan clutched the stone. Mara's eyes glowed. We're the bridge, she said again. We can send her back or bind her. They guided the stone over the water, tracing spirals in the river. The children followed, mimicking the motion. The river mother screamed, water rising in violent waves. Bridges and trees bent toward them, threatening to crush the canoe. Ethan felt a tug, not of the river but of his own fear. If he faltered, they would be pulled into her watery domain forever. But Mara's hand was steady. The spiral glowed brighter than the sun. Finally, the river's violence paused. The water settled. Children circling gently, the river mother's form shrank, receding into the depths. The spiral stone pulsed once, sending her back beneath the surface along with the village. The children followed, disappearing slowly. Ethan and Mara floated in silence, exhausted, gripping the canoe, sunlight warming their backs. For a moment, all was still. They reached the next bend in the river. Calm, normal. The fog lifted completely. Ethan looked around. No footprints, no dolls, no children. Mara's necklace had stopped glowing, the spiral faint. "We made it," she whispered. Ethan nodded, though unease remained. In every reflection on the water, he saw faint shapes, tiny, pale faces, eyes watching, waiting. The river was quiet, for now. The next day, the river seemed ordinary. Birds called, sunlight danced on ripples, and the wind rustled the trees. Ethan and Mara paddled in silence, wary of every shadow. Yet, the air carried an undertone, faint, almost imperceptible, a chorus of whispers carried by the current. Ethan glanced at Mara. She squeezed the spiral stone in her hand, eyes scanning the riverbank. "They're close," she murmured, "even here, even now." As dusk approached, the riverbank darkened unnaturally. Trees bent as if leaning toward the water. Shadows stretched across the river, twisting unnaturally. Ethan saw movement, small figures, darting between tree trunks. The children had returned, silent, their eyes glowing faintly. Mara whispered, "They're testing us again, seeing if we're strong enough to resist." The water trembled beneath their canoe, as if acknowledging her words. Night fell. They camped by a sandbar, fire burning weakly. The laughter returned, soft, echoing across the water. Faces pressed against the river's surface, pale and silent, watching. Ethan held the spiral stone, its warmth pulsing through his veins. He realized it was more than a tether. It was a connection. The children circled the canoe, hovering, waiting. Mara's eyes glowed faintly. "We can't leave, not yet." The river began to rise, creeping toward the campsite. Ethan tried to paddle, but the water moved faster than possible. Shapes formed in the mist, pale children, hundreds of them, holding hands, forming circles around the canoe. Their voices hummed in unison, vibrating in Ethan's chest. The spiral stone flared, cutting through the fog with a blinding white light. The children recoiled, but the river mother emerged behind them, colossal, her voice like rolling thunder. "You cannot escape me." Ethan and Mara held the stone together. Light surged, pushing back water and mist. The children screamed, a high-pitched chorus that cut through the night. The river mother's form distorted, her face stretching impossibly high. "You cannot contain me," she bellowed. Ethan felt the pull of the river inside him, a cold, ancient presence trying to drag him under. Mara whispered, "We are the bridge. We decide her fate." The spiral stone pulsed, projecting lines of light across the water, tracing patterns in the current. The river mother thrashed violently, waves crashing against trees and banks. The children followed the stone's movement, circling, aiding in its power. Ethan understood the stone could bind her. He focused, channeling fear into will, guiding Mara as she moved in sync. Water sprayed, fog twisted, the air hummed with energy older than the river itself. Finally, The spiral formed a complete pattern on the water's surface. The river mother shrieked, a sound that shook the trees. The children pressed into the light, their forms blending with it, reinforcing the bond. The river's pull weakened. The mother's massive body began to shrink, cracks forming across her watery skin, light pouring through. Ethan's arms ached, but he held on. Mara's voice echoed in his head. We can do this together. The river mother's form collapsed into the spiral, her scream fading into gurgles and whispers. The children began to sink gently into the water, their faces peaceful. The spiral stone pulsed one final time, sending a wave of white light across the river. Calm returned. The water settled, reflecting the clear sky. Ethan and Mara slumped in the canoe, exhausted, bodies trembling, lungs burning from the effort. For the first time in weeks, the river was silent. Dawn broke. The fog was gone. The river calm. Birds called, and insects buzzed normally. Ethan and Mara paddled downstream, finally seeing familiar landmarks. The town they had passed was untouched. No dolls, no footprints, no lingering children. The spiral stone was dim now, resting in Mara's hand, faint lines etched on its surface. She looked at Ethan. It's over, for now. They reached a bridge, the river ordinary beneath it. People walked, cars passed, unaware. Ethan let out a long breath. Mara's hand held the stone tightly. Do you think they'll come back? He asked. She didn't answer immediately, eyes scanning the water. The river doesn't forget, she said finally. It waits. It remembers. We were lucky this time. Ethan nodded, understanding the truth. The river's reach extended beyond memory, beyond space. They camped that night on a small riverbank. Firelight danced across the water, shadows moving normally. Yet every so often, Ethan thought he saw pale faces in the reflection. He shook his head. Mara's spiral stone was faintly warm. They're just memories, she whispered. We carry them now, but they cannot harm us while we stay vigilant. Ethan nodded, but unease lingered like a stone in his stomach. The following days passed uneventfully. Though Ethan noticed subtle changes, the river seemed to mirror their emotions, rippling with tension, calming with ease. Shadows moved strangely near the banks. A faint giggle echoed from time to time, too far away to locate. They paddled cautiously, knowing the river mother and the children were not gone, merely contained. One evening, while resting, Mara traced the spiral stone across the water. Light flickered briefly, forming tiny spirals across the surface. Ethan watched, heart racing. Are they testing us again? He asked. Mara shook her head. No, they're communicating. They want to ensure we remember, so we don't let her loose again. Ethan felt the weight of the river's legacy settle on him. They had survived, but at a cost. Night fell. Fog clung to the river, thin but present. Ethan awoke to ripples moving toward him. No wind, no current. Pale faces appeared just beneath the surface. He grabbed the spiral stone, calling to Mara. She awoke beside him. Together, they traced spirals in the air and water. The faces watched, then sank silently. The river mother did not appear, but her presence lingered, heavy and expectant. Morning brought clarity. The river looked ordinary. Birds, wind, sunlight. Ethan and Mara paddled downstream, exhausted but relieved. Yet Ethan noticed reflections shifting unnaturally at the river's edges. Shadows stretched, forming faint spirals in the water. He gripped the paddle, knowing they were not entirely free. The river's memory was alive, watching, patient. They reached a small town, safe, populated, normal. Children played along the banks. Adults walked dogs. Ethan's chest lifted in relief. Mara smiled faintly, keeping the spiral stone visible. "We've bridged it," she said. "The river is bound, for now." Ethan nodded, though every instinct screamed that the calm was temporary. That night, camped on the edge of the town's park, the river quiet, Ethan finally slept. But his dreams carried the river, children's faces, spirals on water, the mother's immense form. He woke with a chill, the spiral stone warm against his palm. Mara was asleep beside him, calm outside. The river whispered softly, a lullaby and a warning. Weeks passed. Life returned to normal. Ethan and Mara moved slowly along the river, ensuring no unusual phenomena. Yet in reflections, they occasionally saw pale eyes blinking at them, vanished before they could focus. The spiral stone remained, faintly warm, a tether, a reminder, a promise the river had not forgotten. One evening, Ethan looked at the river. Fog curled faintly, almost imperceptibly. Tiny ripples appeared in spirals. He touched the stone, now faint, and whispered, "We remember." Mara nodded beside him, her hand warm. The river settled, but in every whisper of water, every subtle movement, the memory of the children and of the river mother remained alive. They paddled downstream, sun rising behind them. The river gleamed calm, ordinary, peaceful. For now, but Ethan knew the truth. The river waits, patient, ancient, remembering every soul it had touched. The children were gone, the mother contained, but the river's whisper never ceased. One day it would call again, and when it did, the spiral stone would glow, the water would tremble, and the nightmare would begin anew. Ethan woke to a thin mist curling along the river. The water shimmered unnaturally. Mara stirred, still clutching the spiral stone. "It's back," she whispered, not fully, but enough. Small ripples formed on the surface, spiraling outward. Faces emerged for a fraction of a second, pale children, eyes blank, staring at them. Ethan shivered. The river had remembered them. As they paddled downstream, the banks seemed to close in. Trees bent unnaturally toward the water. Small footprints appeared in the mud, but no children were visible. Ethan felt the river's pull stronger than before. It was subtle, a tug at his chest, at his mind. Mara touched the spiral stone. It glowed faintly. "They're testing us again," she murmured, "seeing if we remember." Night fell early. Their fire flickered weakly on the riverbank. Ethan noticed shadows moving without wind. Tiny faces blinked in the water, and whispers filled the air. The spiral stone pulsed softly, guiding Mara to trace patterns along the river's edge. Each pattern seemed to calm the ripples, but not entirely. The children watched, patient, silent, knowing the stone's power but testing it anyway. A fog rolled in, curling tightly around their camp. Ethan thought he heard footsteps in the mist, small, deliberate, pacing around them. The water lapped unnaturally, reflecting shapes that didn't exist. Mara gripped his hand. "They are learning," she said. "Every step we take, every reaction we have, they remember. The river never forgets." Ethan swallowed, realizing the fight was far from over. They tried to sleep, but the whispers continued, faint and rhythmic. Ethan's dreams were haunted by pale children running along submerged streets, floating above water, their eyes glowing faintly. The river mother appeared in fragmented visions, her form stretching impossibly across the sky. He awoke with a start, gasping, clutching the spiral stone. Mara was awake too, her eyes reflecting worry. By morning, the river appeared normal. Birds called, the wind rustled leaves, sunlight glittered on the surface. Yet every reflection contained subtle anomalies, pale eyes blinking too slowly, ripples forming unnaturally, small spirals forming and fading. Ethan paddled cautiously. Mara followed, her hands steady on the spiral stone. The children were hidden now, but their presence pressed on them, patient and relentless. That afternoon, they spotted a small dock empty, abandoned. Dolls lined the planks, wet and mossy, carved with spirals. Mara knelt, touching the dolls. "They're markers," she whispered. "The river leaves reminders, messages for those who return." He scanned the water. Ripples formed concentric circles, faintly glowing. The river itself was alive, aware, observing, waiting. Night fell. Ethan awoke to movement on the water. Small pale figures floated just beneath the surface, circling the canoe. Their eyes glowed faintly. Whispers echoed fragmented words he almost understood. "Join. Stay. Remember." The spiral stone pulsed in Mara's hand, brightening in response. Together they traced spirals across the water, sending light rippling through the children's forms. The whispers stopped, for now. Dawn brought false calm. Ethan and Mara paddled, but the river tugged subtly at their canoe. Every bend seemed exaggerated, every current unnaturally strong. Shadows moved along the banks, twisting unnaturally. Mara's voice was soft but firm. "We have to be careful. One misstep, one lapse, and they'll test us fully. The river mother will return." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of vigilance settle on his chest. That evening, the fog thickened, shapes flickered at the edges of vision. Children's voices hummed in a rhythm too perfect, too synchronized. Ethan and Mara paddled through it, clutching the spiral stone. Each ripple seemed to mirror their movements. The river had become a reflection of them, their fear, their caution, their connection to the stone. The children observed patient, unmoving, waiting for a sign of weakness. The next day, a bridge appeared in the distance, not the one from before, but a smaller, older structure. Shadows moved on it. Ethan noticed pale children standing at the edge, staring at them. One waved faintly, smiling. Mara whispered, "They're reminding us. They can reach anywhere the river touches." Ethan shivered, knowing that even human civilization was not entirely separate from the river's domain. As night fell, the river pulsed, tiny waves forming spirals. Ethan and Mara camped near an overgrown bend. The children appeared above the water, hovering in the mist. Whispers swirled, words forming, "Remember, obey, follow." The spiral stone flared faintly, countering the pull. Ethan and Mara worked together, tracing patterns on the water to hold the children at bay. They slept lightly, the river murmuring softly beneath them. Morning revealed footprints again, small, elongated, leading to the water. Ethan's chest tightened. Mara touched the spiral stone, which glowed in response. "They're leaving signs," she said. "They're teaching their world to be seen by ours, if we look closely." Ethan nodded, uneasy. Every step forward was a negotiation with the river's memory, and he realized that leaving this river fully was impossible. By afternoon, the river twisted unnaturally. Reflections shifted, showing submerged streets and floating houses. Small figures moved beneath the surface, occasionally breaking through in glimpses. Ethan tried to focus on the present, but the river pulled him back to its memory. Mara's grip on the spiral stone was firm. "We have to stay connected," she said. "If we let go, they'll take us in fully." Night came quickly. Shadows moved through the fog, small hands pressing faintly against their canoe. The children hovered above, their humming low, steady, like a heartbeat. The river itself pulsed with life, bending around them, testing their control. Ethan and Mara traced spirals, reinforcing the stone's power, keeping the children at bay. But every ripple reminded them, the river never forgets, never rests, and never truly releases its prey. Dawn broke. Ethan scanned the river. It looked normal, but small spirals glimmered faintly on the surface, reflecting the sun. Mara touched the stone. "They Still there, she said, waiting for another moment, another lapse. Ethan nodded. He felt exhaustion and dread in equal measure. The river had become a permanent part of their lives, a presence beyond control, beyond forgetting. By evening, the fog returned. A low, rhythmic chant rose from the river, faint but deliberate. Children floated on the surface, circling their canoe. Ethan traced spirals on the water, keeping the patterns intact. Mara's hand glowed faintly with the stone's light. They test us nightly now, she whispered. We survived once, but we must endure always. Ethan's heart sank. The river had claimed their vigilance as part of its own. Night deepened. Ethan thought he saw pale faces in reflections of the fire. Tiny ripples formed words he could barely comprehend. Forever. Bridge. River. The spiral stone pulsed softly in Mara's hand. They worked together, tracing spirals and guiding the river's energy, holding the children at bay. The river mother did not appear, but her voice echoed faintly in the mist. One day, morning light brought no relief. The river shimmered unnaturally. Shadows lingered at the banks, twisting unnaturally. The children hovered in groups, silent, patient. Ethan realized that the river had claimed them as its guardians, tethered by the spiral stone. They were now part of its memory, intermediaries between its domain and the human world. Every day, every night, the vigilance would continue. By evening, the river pulsed with life. Ripples formed tiny spirals, small faces appearing and disappearing in the water. Ethan and Mara paddled silently, tracing lines of light with the spiral stone. They had learned the rhythm, their lives now intertwined with the river's memory. Calm returned, but only for a moment. The children watched, the river waited, and the stone glowed faintly, a constant reminder. The nightmare endured, eternal. The river gleamed silver in the fading light. Ethan and Mara paddled slowly, wary. Every reflection hinted at movement beneath the water. Faint ripples, a flash of pale eyes, the curvature of small bodies beneath the surface. The spiral stone pulsed softly, its warmth a constant tether to the river's power. Ethan realized the children were not merely observing. They were waiting, learning, and adapting to him and Mara. Night fell like a heavy curtain. Fog rose, curling tightly along the banks. From the mist came whispers, soft but insistent. Remember, remember. Bridge, bridge. Ethan shivered, holding the spiral stone. Mara's voice was calm, steadying him. It's a warning, she said. The river never forgets. It's teaching us vigilance. Even as the words reassured him, fear lingered, a constant knot in his chest. The children surfaced, hovering just above the water, their blank eyes reflecting firelight from the campfire. They circled the canoe slowly, methodically, a silent chorus of patience. Ethan traced spirals on the water, guiding them, enforcing the delicate balance. Mara's hands glowed faintly, reinforcing the stone's power. Every ripple became a negotiation with the river. One wrong move, and the nightmare could resume. A sudden chill swept through the river. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and tiny ripples formed concentric patterns in the water. Ethan noticed faint faces pressed against the underside of the canoe, watching. Mara's whisper carried over the water. They're testing boundaries again. The children were silent, patient, waiting for an opening, a lapse in vigilance. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility pressing down like water itself. Dawn brought calm, but only superficially. The river shimmered unnaturally, reflecting distorted images of the surrounding forest. The children emerged in small groups, gliding above the water, circling with the precision of guardians. Ethan and Mara paddled in rhythm with the spirals they traced, the stone pulsing faintly with each motion. The river mother did not appear, but her presence was implicit. an omnipresent force beneath the surface. That night, the fog thickened. Ethan's eyes caught fleeting movements, tiny hands, pale faces hovering just beyond the firelight. The whispers returned, almost musical in rhythm. Bridge, bridge, river, river. The spiral stone glowed warmly in Mara's hand, and they moved together, tracing spirals across the water. Every ripple responded, reinforcing the delicate barrier between the river's memory and the real world. Morning brought relief, but it was fleeting. Subtle ripples formed spirals on the water without wind. Ethan noticed shadows beneath the surface, moving in impossible ways. Mara held the stone with quiet determination. "We are its bridge," she said. "It cannot touch us while we hold the spirals steady." Ethan nodded, understanding the full extent of their fate. Their vigilance was eternal, their lives forever tethered to the river's memory. Evening descended, and the river pulsed softly, almost imperceptibly. Ripples formed faint spirals, children's faces emerging in fragments. Ethan and Mara paddled in silence, aware of every subtle movement. The river had become a living, breathing entity, a presence that remembered everything. The children followed, learning their rhythm, adjusting to their patterns, testing their patience. The river's influence stretched beyond sight, beyond comprehension. Night fell fully, bringing fog and whispers. Ethan felt the tug in his chest, subtle but insistent. The children hovered above the water, blank eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. The spiral stone flared softly, responding to their collective presence. Ethan and Mara moved in sync, tracing spirals, reinforcing the barrier. The river mother did not appear physically, but her shadowy influence rippled through the mist, a reminder of the eternal vigilance required. Dawn finally arrived. The river looked calm, ordinary, peaceful. Ethan and Mara paddled downstream, exhausted but resolute. The spiral stone rested between them, faintly glowing, a tether to the river's memory. They had survived countless tests, but the children remained, and the river's influence persisted. Ethan realized the truth. The river waits, patient, ancient, remembering every soul it had touched. One day it would call again, and when it did, vigilance would be the only defense. Their lives were forever intertwined with the river, guardians of its memory, bound by spirals, tethered to its whispering waters.